Hello. Can you hear me?
All
Can you hear
right.
me?
Well, I can, Terry. Hi.
How are you? I'm recording.
Okay, I can adjust the light. I can adjust the backdrop. What would you like me to do? Is this
Nothing.
okay?
Everything looks perfect.
Okay, great. Good, good.
How are you
All
doing?
right. So I'm good. I've been in session since 10 a.m. this morning. I had an hour break, and so I'm ready to answer some questions as opposed to asking them. So,
All right.
yeah.
So, what did you
Although
do?
I
What?
actually fall into that pattern. So I tend to fall into that pattern sometimes though, just reflecting, but I'm gonna take off the therapist hat right now.
Okay. So, what did you do for that hour to decompress?
I had a second cup of coffee and I pet my cats, and what else did I do? I just kind of like laid back and like listened to outside and
Did you set
yeah.
a timer?
No, I didn't set a timer. I was aware of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying my timer on my phone
Yeah.
to say like, okay, I can relax and the alarm will go off, even if
Mhm.
I need 30 minutes or so forth.
Yeah.
So, since 10 a.m., you said
Yeah, since 10 a.m. No, actually 9:30. I misspoke.
9:30,
9:30.
and you were asking other people questions. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And what's your job title?
Yeah. So I am a psychotherapist.
Okay.
One of my jobs. That's my main bread and butter.
And do you work one-on-one or in a group?
I work one-on-one. I work with individuals and also with couples too.
Okay. Do you
Mhm.
have a specialty, or did you study a certain?
Well, I have I use an eclectic approach. I have studied psychoanalysis. I have studied like more cognitive behavioral, which is like examines. Yeah, I mean, if you don't know what, do you know what that is?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
Sort of
So
like the thinking behind the feeling, like what
yes,
what what story you're telling yourself, and
right.
sometimes to dismantle or at least or examine the story and to see if it's valid. And
Yeah. Oh
yeah.
yeah. You know this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you finding in general people's issues are?
Um. Well, there's there's a lot of anxiety and post pandemic, um, you know, depression and sort of coming off of that. There's a lot of anger, which essentially has been the fact that we have been living under a lot of uncertainty for the past year. I
Hmm.
mean, and then, not only that, but the past 4 years with he who shall not be named in the, at,
Yes.
as the bumbling figurehead. So there's been
Same in our house. Yeah. Keep
Oh,
going.
yeah, it's been like a lot of simmering anger, resentment, feelings of powerlessness. Every time we turn on the news, it's just another horror show. Um,
Right.
so, now that we're coming off of this, I mean, it's really an adjustment period for a lot of
Hmm.
folks, and people are coming in droves to therapy now.
Okay.
Um,
You're in private practice? Is that what it's called?
yes, yeah. Well,
Okay.
I'm with an agency, but it's essentially a private practice. I keep my
Okay.
schedule. I mean, they just deal with my.
And do people contact you through that agency or?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, okay. So, um, how, I mean, I think about how was your 2020?
Oh, it was. It was. I so. I feel like I adjusted well because I'm naturally an introvert. I mean, I like to keep to myself, and when I spend time with people, it's because I'm selective. So I feel like I adjusted. I was one of the fortunate ones. I got to, I was able to tell my former job that I'm working from home. I was working in Elmhurst during the height of the pandemic.
Is that a hospital
Um,
or
it was at an adult home, um,
okay?
and I blew the whistle on the way that people were being treated. I went on
Oh,
record in the media, and so that was incredibly stressful. I thought I would lose my job. I did not lose my job. I said, well, fine. You want me to work here? I'll work from home. That's fine. So they did because they were desperate for people. And in the meantime, the way that I deal with stress is, oh, I have too much work to do. Let me find something else to do.
hmm.
So then I started working and, taking on additional clients in this private practice.
Okay.
So I was working about 70 hours a week through the pandemic. Avoid,
Are
avoid,
you
avoid.
were you always a person who likes their alone time? Were you a loner as a kid, or
Um, yeah, I was.
did you read? And what was
I,
your sort of private?
yeah,
Were a
yeah,
lot of reading. What did you read?
yeah. I read anything I could get my hands on. I would go to the library on Saturday and come back with a stack of books, and I would blow through them.
Fiction, nonfiction.
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, I liked. You know, I was a I was a horsey girl, as a lot of girls were. But my mother was really into true crime and Stephen King, so I was raised on that stuff.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
went to Catholic school, and I remember bringing like Stephen King or the Amityville Horror,
Right.
some horrible serial killer thing, and the teachers going, "Where did you get this?" I'm like, "It's my mom's. Leave me alone."
How old
So
were you at that point?
probably like 10, 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I talked my father into taking me to see R-rated movies, which you couldn't see on without a parent or guardian. If you, I think it was 17 or something like that, and
Mhm.
I was like 13, and so when my sixth or fifth grade teacher learned that I'd seen Cuckoo's Nest or whatever she was,
Oh yeah.
but and also I read. My father got a bunch of books, and one of them was a biography of a hit man, and it mentioned
Mhm.
Last Tango in Paris and The Godfather and Deep Throat, and so I think I don't know. I guess it's natural for at a certain age to want to, but so what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a waitress when I grew up.
Okay.
I wanted to be a waitress.
Did you see a waitress? Were you watching Alice or?
Yeah. Yep. There you
Really?
go. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And my grandmother had also been a waitress, although prior to the time I was cognizant of what that was. But
Did you want to be Alice or did you want to be Kiss My Grits? I
I
forgot her
wanted
name.
I wanted to be a combination of Alice and Flo because
Flo.
Alice seemed to have like the level head
Yeah.
about her, and Flo was kind of a firecracker, and I was a little bit of a shy kid. It's like, well, I don't have her chutzpah, but she was all about the snappy comebacks like Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
Like she could just put someone in their place, and she had no time, and she had the big wig, and like wasn't she glamorous? And so I told my parents I want to be a waitress, and they were horrified. No, you don't. You want to be a librarian. You know, you wanted. Why do you want to be this or that? But I wanted to be a waitress, live by myself in a trailer with my cats, and
Okay. What
I
what were
did
your
that.
parents? What,
My parents, my mother worked, she didn't go to college. She worked as like an insurance claims adjuster, and my father never he was one semester short of an art education degree, and he ended up working at General Electric.
but I interrupted you. Were you going to say something? There was a trajectory of the waitress ambition.
Oh, yeah. So ultimately, I did get to live my waitress dream. I mean, I do live by myself with my cats in an apartment, which is the New York City equivalent of a trailer, I guess. So, and it's a long apartment, so I guess it's trailer shaped. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
living the dream. And I did end up being in the restaurant industry for about 2 decades. So
In what, in as a waitress?
as a waitress, a bartender, a manager, I worked as a cook. I was just all over the place.
Wow. In New York City or
No, this was in Philadelphia.
okay.
Yeah,
And where did you grow up?
Erie, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow. And when did you decide to did you go from the restaurant business and then study to become a therapist or
I did. Yeah,
okay.
I made a break. I was this was in my late 20s, and I said, I need to do something because I was having too much fun. And yeah, it's like, okay, let me shift gears while I still have my brain cells, and and my ambition. And then I left the business. Although I did, like here and there, like work at a couple places, just because we got to pay the rent. So
Yeah.
mhm,
So did you what made you choose therapy and what school did you go to?
yeah. So I mean, I chose therapy because I've always been fascinated with human behavior. I remember at like when I was reading these serial killer books that my mother and I would trade back and forth, thinking like, oh my gosh, what makes these people tick? This is so fascinating to me. I was so interested in human behavior, and I remember saying I want to work with like really like disturbed people. Um, and then fast forward years later, I end up as a bartender and a waitress, and lo and behold, I'm working with really disturbed people. I'm
Yes.
both like as colleagues, and also I'm serving them drinks. I got my undergrad in psychology. I was just interested in that. I didn't know what I wanted to be at that time. I thought, well, I'm perfectly happy in the restaurant business. I just want to stay here. I'll figure out what it is that I want to do. And then I realized it's like, yeah, I need to get out of this business. I want to do more. So, I've always had an inclination to help people and be of service, and people would always come to me with their problems. I was the person who people would call up, like, oh, help me with this, listen to this, help me, and I would always listen. And I was fascinated with what was going on, but also, just knowing like, wow, I'm there for someone. So, so that's what drew me to becoming a therapist.
So how far back does that go as far as like being someone that people felt comfortable opening up to? Like how was
Oh,
junior
that,
high for say?
yeah,
Because
that
sometimes that
like
can
back,
well,
mhm.
as far back
Yeah,
as
back
junior
then.
high, yeah.
As far,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
What other books? Well, what was your favorite serial killer book or
Yeah,
case?
there, there was this guy. I forget when it was. It was like maybe the middle of the century, middle of the 20th century. He was nicknamed the Shoemaker.
Oh
And
yeah. That was
you know him?
horrifying. Yeah,
Oh
child
my god.
killer and how he
Yeah.
tortured his children or I don't think I could get through that one, but I
Yeah,
had the book at some point.
that was a
Yeah.
tough one. He
That
had
was a
he had
tough one.
hamsters. Yeah,
What?
he made little. His parents, his adoptive parents or foster parents, were shoemakers or something. It's been like 40 years since I've read this, but
Yeah, I didn't
I
make it
remember
through it, but yeah. Keep going.
fucked up.
Yeah.
But he had hamsters, and he made like little shoes for the hamsters, and he had these elaborate stories for the hamsters, and it was so disturbing, but
Yeah.
I ate it up. I love that stuff. I don't. Right now, where I am in my life, it's like I don't find, like I'm not fascinated with serial killers. I'm not
Right.
fascinated with true crime. Now I sort of resent the fact that it's being sort of touted as entertainment, and people are
Right.
interested in it. I mean, I lost interest in that a long time
Yeah,
ago.
me too. Yeah, it was sort of an 80s thing, and
Yes.
it was all like growing up and having the I remember coming to New York and seeing this guy selling books on the street. And one was about Charles Starkweather, so I got that. And one was a book about child abuse called Somewhere a Child is Crying. I thought this was horrifying. And then it was another one about incest called Kiss Daddy Goodnight. And I don't have the child abuse book, but I was like horrified. I was like, is this the grown up world? And I was like, sort of outraged. And I just sort of wrote, those were the subjects of my songs when I was a band, and it was almost like a shock
Hmm.
rock band, meaning like putting this ugliness back in society's face. But because I kind of grew up with um, Leave It to Beaver, like every episode was like, if Beaver had just if Theodore had just been honest at the get-go, it wouldn't have
Hmm.
turned into this. Um, but I think it was all. And then I read John Waters' Shock Value, and I
Oh
thought that was
yeah.
hilarious in a way of taking sort of like the absurd and the outsiders and the crime and sort of with humor and being clever, somehow like almost alchemically transforming it and bringing the humanity out of it. Or I just found that fascinating in the whole humor of his
Hmm.
the language and everything fascinating. But I think he made it true crime kind of popular. But even before then, it was Truman Capote started with In Cold Blood and so forth. And even before that, Hitchcock,
Hmm.
it was always fascinated with people who with psychopaths and the perfect crime and so forth. So there's always a lineage, but it seemed to it was also like entering into another person's disturbed mind, or like getting close to the fire but
Right.
not getting burned, and
Hmm.
also going into dangerous areas to sort of or at least psychological, to sort of test yourself, or like
Hmm.
because it's exciting. But yeah, I think the world was a little bit more safer when we had like three channels of television to draw from. It, I mean, now the entire world and all sorts of points of view are a few clicks away, and it's a different landscape. And but I still think there's a tendency for people to test themselves in a certain way, almost psychological boot camp. I think Wes Craven called horror movies for teenagers to sort of like to to test to have this sort of mock fear or rehearsal fear
Hmm.
situation in lieu of actual danger. But sometimes a made up fear can be more frightening and debilitating than an actual clear and present danger. And I
Oh,
guess that's
absolutely.
the difference between anxiety and fear. Fear might be, there's, you know, clear and present danger, like there's a grizzly bear coming
Right.
at me. I'm
Yes.
between a grizzly bear and her child, and I'm in,
Yep.
and that's an appropriate reaction. But anxiety is almost like there's this imagined
Yes.
fear out there that I can't manage. And it's so people, and today it's just so easy for us to indulge that. But I hope hopefully people get through it somehow. I guess the isolation too. I think with the past year, and I'm assuming you did a lot of or most of your therapy through Zoom and so forth.
It
But I
was
think
awesome.
isolation can be a very dangerous circumstance for people struggling with because they had those tests about there's the classic rat has either heroin or water, and they would choose the heroin. But then there was this new experiment where the rat was given options to
Mhm.
like play on a wheel or have other like rats to interact with. They didn't necessarily choose the heroin. Did you hear of that study?
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
and the
Yeah.
idea that human connection has a lot to do with either mental illness or addiction and stuff, and that
Absolutely. Yes.
because I think also with the isolation that people feel on a deeper level, like what is that difference between when people are in person live and when they're communicating through through Zoom. I like Zoom,
Hmm.
but I can see that some people can find it. I don't know. I don't know. So I'm riffing. So if you have any
Yeah.
reflections,
Go for
please
it.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I mean, I feel like these screens, they're a blessing and a curse. I mean, we have, now we have more ways to connect with people. I mean, I remember when FaceTime came about. I mean, it just sort of happened. I remember being in, like 20 years old and talking to friends over the phone and thinking, oh, I wish I could see your face. And then it just sort of crept up on us. And it's like, wow, like now we're living in the future, and no one's sort of made a big deal about it. It's just sort of accepted. I mean, I'm not very technologically,
Right.
astute. So when this happened, I was like, oh, really? We can do this now? Why wasn't there like a major headline? You know.
Yeah.
So
And I think also being able to recognize someone's facial, these almost sub communications or something that people aren't really aware of. And I think of like, the battlefield of Twitter and stuff where it's very anonymous and people are able to hide behind some anonymity, and they're not in, they can be more cruel
yes.
by proxy. And it's almost like when you see the other person's face, you're able to, it actually reflects back to their, it's easier for them to avoid their own ugliness.
Yes.
Um, but I do Facebook, but not really anything else. And even then I had to take a break from it because there was this false, sort of like acting, um, it was sort of indulging all these impulses that, once I realized there was no audience, I was sort of in an echo chamber. I realized it was sort of wasted energy that I'd probably do better either journaling about or making a film about or a piece of music. And I had to sort of take a break from it. And even when who got elected, I had to take a break from
Oh.
politics for a year. It
Mhm.
was very, and then get back, and I started to sort of ignore uh, him and see, well, what else, what's going on? I don't know. But we're in, I mean, this is revolutionary, the internet. And I feel like, it's very chaotic now, but it's going to find its, its, its balance. I just hope nothing, it doesn't have to, I just hope we don't have to learn a lesson a
Mhm.
really difficult way. But also I think the fact that, in the early 60s, they had the Cuban Missile Crisis, and there was the looming, and even in the 50s, people had air raid shelters thinking the bomb was going to be dropped, I think.
Mhm.
And we got past that in a way, um, there's a flip side where, someone could sabotage, some of, so because we're so dependent on the technology, or like hack, um, a mainframe or something like that. The fact that those things don't happen kind
Mhm.
of gives me hope, because I'm
Right.
kind of by nature a pessimist.
Mhm.
But and I love Robert J. Lifton. He's a psychohistorian who studied brainwashing in China and was
Mhm.
a witness for the Patty Hearst case about brainwashing, and she's sort of a pioneer in that. And he studied, survivors of Hiroshima. He studied and the Nazi doctors and like this horrendous stuff in history. And he goes in and it's
Mhm.
like he does a lot of person to person accounts. And I just feel like um, that I remember he had, all in hoping that this doesn't happen again. And he knows, the fact that he's, that this stuff didn't depress him, and immobilize him. There's got to be some optimism there, or like, and I think he's still alive. He's like early 90s or something. Like, he's one of my heroes, and because he went to these dark places, and he sort of, and made important books about really horrifying things, and his, I visited him, and uh, he was very nice, and he's because he used to teach at Harvard, and also John Jay, who I had a friend who worked there, and that's how I got to meet him. And but I remember he had a debate with Steven Pinker, who has this book called The Better
Yeah.
Angels of Our Better Nature, saying that that things are better than they
Right.
used to be, and he uses a lot of statistics about sort of like murder rates and so forth. But um, Robert J. Lifton was like saying, well, yeah, we things might be better, but we have the technology to do this mass killing that would be like just like dwarf anything in history. But because we thought about loose nukes, and I don't know, all these like doomsday scenarios. I guess I'm drawn to them because of that same impulse to get close to the flame and not be burned, or go like, or just like work with my fear and terror. And but I mean, it was killer bees in the 70s,
Oh
and it was
yeah.
the gas shortage, and apparently there's, we didn't run out of gas. And
Mhm.
have you seen any of the Adam Curtis films? He's a BBC documentarian.
What were the name's not ringing a bell, but what did he?
He did The Century of the Self, which
Oh yeah. Oh, I love
Edward
that.
Bernays, and like he
That was
did
great.
Power of Nightmares, which was a parallel story of how Al Qaeda grew at the same time that the neocons grew. And
Mhm.
he's got the power of a conspiracy theory, but they're not far fetched. And
Mhm.
he sort of has, I think, the access to the BBC archives, and his stuff is. I think the latest one was a hyper normalization. It was a lot of it is about that we had these nations, and there was a sort of controlled information, and the nation had to be sold a certain story, because we didn't know who could almost. I mean, the conspiracy theorists would say this is all intentionally diabolical, when a lot of it is just practical. You can't give the history of the Middle East to a nation that's worried about gas prices, or what. It's like sometimes you have to. But now that we have access to the whole world, these stories can be more like fleshed out. Did you see that hyper normalization where they talked about Gaddafi being a complete like straw man? And
I
I
didn't
don't
see
know, it's all this
that, but
like revisiting history with like a wider view, and
mhm.
it's very compelling. But and I think that's where what's happening now is that now we see, it's now the globe is a couple of clicks away, and that people's stories are being broken up, and we have to make new stories. And if you don't have, people's foundations are being rocked, and that can be unsettling, and you have to find a new, what is it called? um
Equilibrium.
yeah, exactly, that's exactly the word. So, you have any thoughts on what I just
Yeah.
said?
Well, I mean, I'm going back to Century of the Self,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of my absolute favorite things. Like I tell everyone, I think like, oh, yeah, you have to see this. It's so
Right,
fantastic.
required viewing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, just the power of, the power of subliminal messages in advertising, and how that just seeps in, and and how easily like someone can be set up to be, to be a target, or like the straw man. Um, yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, and something else I want to remark upon with Facebook and social media. I mean, it's it's an opiate. I mean, this is the opiate of the masses. This is the
Yeah.
religion of the masses, because
Yeah.
everyone is so hyper focused on this, looking at this. I mean, you can't be active on Facebook and doing anything of true value. I mean, I'm going to say that, because like, how we can only do one thing at a time. If you're, it's like, you have an hour to spend. If you're looking on Facebook, you're not reading a book, you're not writing anything, you're not making a film, you're not, like,
Yeah,
you're
it's a
doing this.
false reality, but it does
Yeah.
give you those endorphin rushes, and I think it's programmed that way. There's a fascinating Frontline documentary on AI, which
Mhm.
talks about how they took the or maybe it's hypernormalization, where he talks about, it's the Adam Curtis film. It's like 3 hours long, but it's available on YouTube.
Oh,
Talks about that there's this supercomputer that it's been designed to mimic the therapy of Carl Rogers, which was basically
yeah.
hearing what the patient said and repeating back to them what they said. And
Hmm.
that's how they've designed the the algorithm, I guess. So yeah, that one I would recommend if you got a spare
I
three
will absolutely read
hours.
that, or
What?
watch that.
Yeah.
That sounds so fascinating.
He's
But it is like his. I mean, Carl Rogers' whole thing was person-centered psychology. It's like, just positive affirmation. So if you're getting like all these warm, fuzzy, unconditional positive regard from a human, why not get it from your phone,
yeah.
which is at your right at your fingertips.
Yeah, I think it's like empty calories. I think it's like junk food. And I think that's what I sense, because I remember seeing, because I grew up and I was watching these amazing movies like Dog Day Afternoon when I was 13, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and like Serpico. And I was like, these things are awesome. And then like Jaws came, and I was like, this is amazing. And then Star Wars came, and it was sort of like, now the kids, they become big budget kids movies. And I remember seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark, and like during the film, I was like exhilarated. But immediately when I left the theater, I was absolutely empty, and I felt cheated. I felt like, what was that? I was
Mhm.
like, I was tricked into thinking that something important was happening, and there's no payoff. I mean, there's nothing. I walk away with nothing. I have no new insight into human beings or myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I felt cheated, and I was like, I think there was that transition, and because when I saw 2001 when I was a kid, and I started to understand what cinema was, meaning what a pure image. I mean, now it's I was 50, turned 59 yesterday, so all my references are all
Sure.
old. But we have superheroes now, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, and I guess we have independent films, but I'm so out of the loop. But there seemed to be that transition where
Mhm.
if we just make big budget kid films, but there was a moment there when we were talking about kind of like human beings, and it reflected kind of real life. And I think felt most safe in a movie theater, and I felt like maybe this is how I'm getting a window into, maybe this is how the grown up world works, and maybe this can give me a guide. But I didn't feel like any of the fantasy films gave me a guide into how to give me a map of like how a grown up world would kind of be.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
so, and I think that's interesting. I think a lot of times where people, we have these, I guess it goes back to cognitive behavioral therapy. We tell ourselves stories, and I think a lot of them, when the story gets broken down, sometimes you have a crisis, and then you have to build yourself up again. But
Mhm.
um, I think there's hope in that too. I mean, um, if you can find a new footing that's more based in, because usually a lot of times, you know, you have fantasy and the reality butts up against it, and you have to renegotiate.
Mhm.
But you have to go. I think you have to go deeper to find a foundation, and I think reevaluate things. Um, it's a little hot here. I'm rambling, but that's okay. How did wow. Well, that's pretty cool. So, I mean, the fact that you wanted to be a waitress, you're a waitress, and then you found yourself. It seems like what you did and who you were integrated. I think
Mhm.
I had dreams that, you know, were sort of more grandiose than usual, probably because my circumstances were uh, something I wanted to get away from. But so how did you find yourself in Robert's movie, or how do you know Robert?
Oh, I know Robert through tarot through back in, I want to say about about 5 years ago. There was a studio called the Tarot Society in
Yeah,
Bushwick, and I befriended the owners of that. First, I met Darcy Leonard, who was the founder, and her husband at the time,
Kevin.
Kevin.
Yeah, I know them. Yeah.
And they, I had just moved here, and I met them, and I got to be friends with Darcy, and she invited me. She said, "Oh yeah, I should come over sometime." So I came over, and at the time I wasn't working. I was between jobs, had nothing better to do. She said, "Oh, I need someone to watch the studio on Wednesday
But
afternoon."
were
So
you drawn to the tarot before then?
I wasn't.
You weren't.
I was I was a scientist. I was very skeptical of all of that. I thought, yeah,
Was it
tarot.
just random that you were you in the neighborhood or?
No, I wasn't.
Oh,
I just I really liked Darcy. I said, I have
okay.
nothing better to do. I'm going to go. And I went in it with a lot of curiosity. I thought, you know what, this is my opportunity because you know this is before I was I was between jobs. I thought, you know what, a lot of people believe in, put a lot of stock in tarot, astrology, divination. I said, I'm going to go there to learn. So I
Right.
went there to learn, and I learned, I met all kinds of like really interesting people, Robert Pepper among them.
Yeah.
Um, and every time I would go, I'd meet some new person, and there was always a conversation going on about tarot or, astrology or, this is rising in Mercury. And I would, it's like, and I would listen to it, and it's like, okay, well, now I felt like my mind had been opened. It's like now I'm
Right.
a little more accepting and less cynical about it.
Yeah.
It's a belief system. And I've been using tarot with myself and sometimes with friends, and I've started to use it with some of my younger clients.
Which deck are you using?
I use a deck called, it's Bad Girl Tarot by Katie Skelly,
Okay.
who is a cartoonist. She's brilliant. But um, my boyfriend gave me a copy of these cards as a gift like years ago, and I thought, that's I thought it was thoughtful, and I've had them on my coffee table. And at the beginning of the pandemic, like there's nothing better to do. He would come over and we'd hang out, and I started like looking at the cards. So it's like I'm going to draw some cards, and what I use them now is they're a projective measure, just like a Rorschach test or
Yeah.
anything else. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to draw some cards. I'm going to draw like one for tomorrow, one for today, and one for yesterday, and one, and I look at the images and I make my own meaning. I mean, I
Right.
project my own meaning from it, and that's what they're for.
I
Um,
agree. I agree. Yeah.
so,
I think it's just, I think almost it's like before there was therapy, there was a tarot reading. It was an opportunity for people to talk about themselves and reflect themselves and see themselves within a context of a world and all these almost like a mythology. But I think it was an opportunity for people to self reflect and work with others. And yeah, I use it that way too. And I mean, there's it's interesting because Alejandro Jodorowsky, the filmmaker, and he's he was told by Andre Breton that the Marseille deck is the only one, and but he does have a great book called The Way of Tarot, which is
Mhm.
great. And but I remember I started to get into this stuff. I was very, it would always like astrology would just make me angry because I was like, look, if it's all written in the stars, why do I have to be alive? If it's all
Mhm.
predestined, then I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here if I don't have some semblance of free will. I would, you know, I don't want. And but it was a girl I was in a relationship with, and so, and I realized, you know, I'm not going to learn anything if I don't
Mhm.
um drop my guard, because it's just fear. And also you know, I wanted to be more attractive to my partner and less it's like, but I see it now as like I'm interested in the left and right hemisphere. And
Mhm.
um Ian Gilchrist has this book called The Master and His Emissary, and I find that fascinating. And I read a book by Gary Lachman called The Secret Teachers of the Western World, where he takes that idea of the left and right hemisphere, of two ways of interpreting the world. It's almost like they don't do different things, but they do the same things differently. And the left hemisphere is sort of for small, um, concentrating on smaller things and taking things apart, and sort of finding prey, you know, that's small and can more uh, um, more, you know, smallerly defined. And then the right hemisphere is sort of like has this idea of, because at the same time the the predator is trying to find prey, and then but that person can become a prey, and sort of the right hemisphere is looking, is sort of having the antenna out for the rest of the world. And that he said that the right hemisphere is older than the left, and that we would almost think that the left hemisphere is the master, but it's actually the right hemisphere is the master. I can't really read the Ian McGilchrist book, but I can read the Gary Lachman book. He's like amazing. His talent is that he can write about esoteric and intellectual subjects and academic subjects in a very readable way. That's his talent, I think. And he got his cue, I think, from Colin Wilson, and he sort of goes over the same territory. But that's helped me. And also just um, it all has to do with fear. Once I realized that you know, spirituality is not science, and that exploring the tarot and mysticism is about you know, it's not about hard science. It's about
Right.
sort of a more sensual or feeling. You know, it really works on, I think that spirituality really just has to do with fear. I mean, it's just like that's the spiritual state, or terror. It just has to do with um and if you regulate that fear, then you can sort of take in things that you can entertain things that be, and the less fearful you are, the more you can, I mean, the more you can take in different perspectives and stuff.
Mhm.
But I think it's a matter of whether that person feels safe.
Mhm.
But what you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like that fear. I mean, that fear ties back to uncertainty, which is anxiety, and the way that you control anxiety is by knowing that or manage anxiety. Well, control, manage, same spectrum, but
Right.
but knowing that you have control and you can understand what's going on, you can understand an outcome, and that's what I think that's the function of like the base function of tarot and like these meaning making systems, so we can explain phenomena, in nature or within ourselves. It's like, why am I having this reaction to this, to this stimulus? Like, why am I being, you know, there, I know that there's not a tiger running at me coming to attack me, but I'm still feeling anxious. I'm still, feeling like this thing in my chest, like,
And it tends to come down to like the story we tell ourselves, right? That we don't question anymore, and that suddenly, and sometimes we don't even realize that we have that story.
right,
Um,
yeah,
and
what's
once we
going to
realize
happen.
that we created that story, we can maybe adjust it. And if it's not working for us, I feel like that seems to be what cognitive behavioral CBT.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think, you know, um, feeling safe with one another, is a big part of spirituality, whether it's fear based or not. And I think, but with the way the world is now, they're really like people can capitalize on fear and make money at it or get likes or clicks and so forth. But I'm hoping it all works out without something terrible happening. But I'm sort of losing my way. But I'm giving the floor to you.
Hmm. Okay, what direction?
Okay,
Like,
so do you only use the bad girl tarot? Are they does what is who's in the bad girl cards? Is
yeah.
like
Uh,
Tora Satana in the bad girl cards?
no, no, they're illustrations. I mean, they are. I mean, I can get the cards if you want.
Okay, yeah.
One moment. So, Katie Skelly is she was a Brooklyn-based artist. I believe she's in LA now.
Cool.
But yeah, this is back, and the first card that comes up is the Emperor. I mean, she has this really marvelous, simple line, you know, that she
The
uses.
first card isn't the Fool.
No, it wasn't well, I just picked it up at
Oh, I
random.
see what you're saying. Okay,
What it
I always
exposes.
keep them in order. Yeah.
Do you really? Yeah,
Yeah.
not me. I like, I pick up the cards and I'll say, okay, like the usual draw that I do for myself is, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and then I'll pick a fourth card, which is just sort of the theme of the week, or the underlying theme. That's the unconscious.
Okay.
Um, but if when I'm drawing the cards, another card will like fall fall out. It's like, oh, that one too. I'm going to include that as well. That's another unconscious card. It's something that revealed itself.
Do you allow yourself to disagree with the card?
Well, yeah, sure. Well, I try to find meaning in all of it.
Right.
Like I got. I mean, like if I get a card and I think, well, what the hell is this? I mean, I have to, and I'm learning. Like I have to look up the meanings for everything.
Right.
Um, I have a very base understanding of some of them.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll look and I'll think, well, what's the meaning behind this? And like it really causes me to
Self-reflect.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's
I
like,
think that's what they're for. And
yeah.
I think when people assume it's some kind of science where there's, 2 + 2 = 4, it's more intuitive, it's more right
Mhm.
brain, it's more and it's more an impetus to start a dialogue with oneself rather than an authority that's going to give you. And I think that understanding is more common now, that people see it as a tool of or to have a conversation with one's unconscious, just like being an artist. Like when I make stuff, a lot of times I'm more interested in a project that I don't know what the outcome's going to be.
Mhm.
Like if I have something and I'm like, oh, this sounds commercial, and like when I was in film school, I'm like, okay, I know they want me to write something like an after school special where there's an epiphany at a coming of age, and I'm like, okay, I wrote it, but I was like, I have no interest in this. I think
Yeah.
this is what they want, but I'm like, I'm completely bored and there's no adventure in it. And like I'd rather go down a road where
Mhm.
I'll have a conversation. And I think people who don't maybe are not necessarily found themselves making art can have that same experience of talking, having a conversation with one's unconscious
Mhm.
and have that moment where you can reflect and say, perhaps there's something here that I'm not that
Mhm.
I should pay attention to or
Right.
reinterpret. And I
Right.
think it's ultimately freeing.
Mhm.
Um, I don't, in the old, I mean, I guess it can still be dangerous if people have but usually the darkness comes from within oneself. I think the more I'm at peace and the more I'm at peace with my conscience, and I am sort of like have made amends in my life, whether directly or within my own meditation practice, the less I feel, the more I've forgiven myself, the less I feel um, uh, susceptible to getting like looking through the goetia and going like, having a nightmare or like feeling like like I'm gonna be possessed by a demon or whatever. But I mean
Right.
that was the thing. But I think a lot of it is a reflection of one's own. That's my experience of one's own psychology, and I guess it can be dangerous because I'd rather stay in the real world and say, yeah, this was, this was a past trauma that is resurfacing, and you're re-experiencing it with these imagined demons. I guess it can be, I mean, that's the thing with people with mental illness. They have this paranoia, and then they usually will speak in that language of demons and so forth. So it's not I wouldn't recommend a schizophrenic work with the tarot or whatever.
Mhm.
But I was like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, I'm not saying it can be dangerous, but I think that's another reason why I was drawn to serial killers, because you want to get close to the flame and not get burned or get,
Mhm.
and also understand, you know, a human did this. Like, where's the human and where's the monster? And
Mhm.
it's like, and they're the nature of evil and so forth has always been fascinating.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so
It
I
all comes
understand
from
people's
trauma.
fear of it, but I think I don't know.
Yeah, it all comes from trauma. I mean, if you
Yeah,
look at these stories about these, serial killers, and also, he who shall not be named,
yeah,
was, like awful, awful, awful family trauma that went on.
yeah.
All of it,
And a lot of people think it's normal, or that the tragedy is that they'll repeat it, and also they won't know that it's abuse, and that they'll think it's normal. They'll, it'll become this
Mhm.
real. I don't know. It's and then and the the molesters are usually have been molested themselves, and like
Mhm.
it's horrible that these things repeat. But I guess it's just, or that someone's been victimized, like will be victimized again. It's like it makes me pissed at God, but I'm supposed to be an atheist, so I can't do that, right? I can't be angry at a God I don't believe in.
Right, right,
But it's only I don't believe in God because there's such a raw deal. But then it's a matter of reality.
right,
But
right.
so yeah,
I've never used tarot when I work with people who have schizophrenia, but now that you said that, I'm like, I would be so fascinated to invite that, because I have a lot of experience working with folks who had florid psychosis and schizophrenia, and the majority of these folks were extremely gentle, and spoke in metaphors,
right.
and the way that, I mean, and I used to love talking to these folks,
I'm
and
almost saying like they're already there. They don't need to
yeah,
go further there.
yeah,
Yeah, they're
oh,
already there. Yeah,
yeah, so
being
it's
like,
like, like, hey, do you know what these cards are? Like, do you know what this? Hey, what do you see? Like, hey, let's talk about this picture. What do you think that is? And I think the power, like the therapeutic power in you, like possibly using tarot with anyone, is that you have someone's just in, is you have someone's undivided attention, and this person is genuinely interested in what you have to say, and they're not dismissing you. They're not saying, well, that's ridiculous, or like, well, of course there's no voodoo doll in the wall, like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, really, tell me more about that, like,
Yeah.
so what do you see here? Like, what, tell me about your experience.
It's more like the language of
It's
the soul or whatever that nobody believes in. But I mean, it seems to be like an important part of our evolution that we have to think magically, or that it's helped us in that um, that a mechanical model of things doesn't really complete the picture, and that
right.
I mean, you'll it's like the shaman or whatever, they'll have a breakdown, but is it a like the West would say this is a mental breakdown, but then another culture would say this is a spiritual awakening, this is a person who's, I don't know, like this, there's a part of the soul that's speaking that needs to be. I mean, I'm fascinated with Jung's journey, where Freud was like, psychology is a strict science, and um he was such a powerful figure, and then Jung was supposed to take over and be his predecessor, but Jung would have to suppress all this artistic side of himself, and the fact that his mother was a spiritualist and a medium, and that he had uncanny experiences that he couldn't explain scientifically, and but it was a part of himself that he couldn't deny, that there was an artist part of himself, but he kept trying to convince himself that he was an artist. And there was and he had a huge crisis with that. He slept with a gun under his pillow, so it's like it wasn't a easy
Mhm.
life, but it seemed like there was a part of himself that needed to speak, that was illogical, and sort of spoke in symbols and so forth. And I think as long as we can honor that as as a different language of how we speak and who we are, that the other, that we don't have to bring to it a mechanical or materialist judgment, or a scientific judgment to it, that we can say this is a myth, a part of ourselves that speaks in myths and in symbols, and that's uh that we don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to shut out because it doesn't
It's a common language. It's
yeah.
it's a common, it's a way of making meaning. Yeah,
And it might
that
seem
transcends.
irrational, it's more poetic, it's more like, what's the but yeah, I think, but yeah, but actually Hodorowski said that this would be, he predicted that it would be a tool in therapy and so forth like that. But I think sort of these worlds are coming together, uh and making their finding the equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would be very um frightened to work with schizophrenic people, I guess. I mean, besides just listening to them and sort of,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't know, I wouldn't want to advise them, besides, just we don't, I don't know, it's fascinating. But so how are schizophrenics treated besides medication? Could you hear? How do
Um,
people treat
I can, yeah, yeah. There's,
yeah, you're freezing a little. Okay.
well, I mean, okay, all right. I mean, I worked with, am I okay now?
Yeah.
How's this? Okay,
Good.
okay. So I've worked with people who have, I call it a psychiatric diagnosis. I don't have a whole lot of stock in the DSM. That's a whole other soapbox. I'd be here all day. So, but I call it, someone with a psychiatric diagnosis or an emotional disturbance. So, um, folks who have the diagnosis of schizophrenia, oftentimes, they have no, there's no psychosis present. They were misdiagnosed. Um, So there's, folks who fall into that camp. The other folks who fall into the, like the typical, like schizophrenic symptoms is just like not having a lot of basis in reality, or having, like episodes of depersonalization, or experiencing hallucinations, auditory, visual, like, whatever. Um, the folks who have, I'm thinking of the people who had, classic, like we're thinking One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? You know, that was completely accurate. I mean, as far as my concern has been, as far as these folks, these are quiet folks. They're, they're gentle. They're, they have been stigmatized. They have been bullied. It's like they know that they're weird. They know that their thoughts are, unusual. They know that people aren't going to believe them, so they're incredibly isolated. Um, and yeah, and afraid and alone and angry. Angry that they have been treated this way. They don't have a lot of personal agency over their own lives. So, um, you know, uh, and there's also a lot of, there can be, I mean, every person is different, but, paranoia, which is fear, you know, um, so if someone is having a paranoid episode, about something, the way to treat that is not, to, call the police and have them taken by force to a locked ward and shot full of, a sedative. Like they will, unless someone's in danger of hurting themselves or someone else. If someone's just ranting, it's just, they're
Yeah.
releasing a demon. Let them release that demon. Like
Yeah.
maybe even listen or stay out of their way. You know.
Well, that's exactly, yeah, exactly. It'd be like be present, and because the tragedy is that it confirms their terror and their paranoia if the rest of the
Absolutely.
world reacts.
Hmm.
And it's almost like if we do nothing, if they're not hurting themselves or others, and we just let this play out,
Yeah.
you're confirming that the world is safer than your terror of your imagined terror, and
Yeah.
that is gonna,
Hmm.
the more, but it's, yeah, it's the tragedy that it can confirm
Hmm.
that because people around them react,
Yeah.
with their fear. That's the
Right.
thing. I think fear feeds on fear, and they talk about, like, I've read about, like, magicians who, you know not stage magicians,
Uh-huh.
who like work with demons and stuff. It's usually they feed on fear, and it's the same. And I like that you said emotional disturbances rather than mental illness, because for, as someone who's had a share of major depression and paranoia and so forth, it's not, I don't resonate with the mental. I resonate with the emotion, that it's an emotional illness, and the baseline is fear, and paranoia is more terror, and also, um
Or having a spiritual crisis as well. It's like I'm not connecting with anything or anyone. Nothing's making sense.
right,
Like there's, what's the meaning? I mean, it's
right,
like, like why am I here? You
right,
know, um, and the other side of that is, we live in New York, and like you encounter, someone who's ranting on the street corner, or someone who's begging, or someone who, has a hideous appearance about them, and people are just ignoring them. And they're not being seen. They're doing everything
yeah,
they can to be seen. They're ranting and raving and screaming and carrying on, and people are just walking past them. Not, I'm not going to look at that person. I'm not.
yeah.
How isolating is that?
I hear that this living in the city can cause schizophrenia. I think I read that on Wikipedia. So it certainly doesn't help if it can be one of the factors
If
in
it's
causing it.
if
Yeah,
it's further isolating,
yeah,
um, yeah, I mean, I mean, if you just stop and like give someone, I mean, and I'm, of course, it depends on the person, but just treat someone with humanity, and people will respond
Yeah.
really well to it.
Yeah. A lot of times, yeah. Because that's what seems to happen. Like when, when some kind of violence happens, it's usually when it happens really fast and people are
Yeah,
both parties are charged up and with fear, and then something, and it's like, and then people look back as if it was or they're drunk,
yeah,
and then people look back as if it was a rational
right,
moment, where a lot of times it's a matter of like both people are in a panic state and something stupid happens, or
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know um
Base emotion behind anger is fear,
yeah.
fear-based aggression.
Yeah, and I think that's, for me, that's like the core spiritual state, and that anger is really a cover for fear, and fear is, am I safe in the world or not? And
Mhm.
I think as the world becomes, as people's stories break down, then people get afraid and so forth. But yeah, all right. So um yeah, I've always thought that I would want to be a therapist, but I never did it. I'm obsessed with, maybe too much myself than, and but I remember being on AOL early on in the '90s and going into a dissociative identity disorder forum and talking to someone who had what they used to call multiple personalities, and it seemed genuine, but also I was trying to sort of, in this, reckless way, but wanted to get all their personalities to sing a song together, and like,
Mhm.
the dark protector came out and sort of threatened me, and also recently saw this woman like demonstrate her altars on YouTube,
Mhm.
and I felt, you know and she got a lot of attacks of like it's fake and so forth, and she was like, it even brought up a new altar that was sort of in response to people saying it's fake, and that altar said she's fake, she's fake, she's faking it. And then when her more dominant altar, gave an explanation, she said, it's fake and not fake. And I could see how people were like, well, what, that can't be true, but it can be true, meaning that it's fake, but it's necessary fake in order to protect, um, the the protect the cohesive, just the
Mhm.
sort
Yeah,
of, no, I don't know, I want to, the self, or I don't even know if there is a self, but just
yeah,
the ego, or just like, I mean, I think
right.
that fear is, we're trying to protect ourselves physically, but also like to have to like a personality is sort of a created defense, and I think it's more malleable than people like to tell themselves. I think a lot of times with cults, people like, I watched the Nexium cult and I thought it was terrible because it was really overlong, and it was really, and it didn't argue against the idea that people are going to say, well, I would never be suspect, I would never be vulnerable to be in this group, and these people are crazy to begin with. And
Right, right.
I thought that it did a disservice, and I thought it did a disservice to any organization that might have on the outside look like a cult, because they're doing these sort of motivational or sort of, and like, because not everything that looks like that on the outside does become diabolical, like Nexium, and
Mhm.
it has a poisonous leader in the middle, a
Right.
psychopathic leader who's
Mhm.
just going to go further and further. It's like, so I think it did a disservice, of course, just to make more money and to stretch out the, but I felt angry, because I thought it could have been explained in an hour and a half, and I could have had experts of saying like, why, how come, how these people, I don't know, I didn't, I don't, what's the point of showing another crazy cult and people being walking away saying like, oh, that would never happen to me, or I'm going to quit this group because it sounds weird. It's like touchy feely or whatever. It's like, but I already made a film called How to Become a Cult Leader, Mind Control Made
Yeah.
Easy, because
Mhm.
of and I was like, oh, in 13 minutes I did what, I feel like that's helped people, and I hope it has, and not, but I do think that spirituality is an important, it seems to, whether you want it or not, you usually have to reckon with it somehow. And that I don't think surrendering in every situation is dangerous, but uh, um, I think is we're one of my favorite bands is King Crimson, and their first hit was 21st Century Schizoid Man, and it
Mhm.
seems like it's like like Jordan Peterson had a breakdown, and I thought that's what they wrote that song for, that guy who was
Yeah.
like very you know he's steeped in the Western tradition and everything, and he's like he's too smart to believe in God, but it's like it's still, at some point, I don't know, that guy, whatever you think of him, he's gone through hell, and I think he gives a shit. But I mean, um, and but whatever. Yeah, but I thought that when he had his breakdown, I felt, and I don't know, his whole family has all these. I felt like that song was like 21st Century Schizoid Man,
Yeah.
because they were calling him schizophrenic. Oh, whatever. It's just a battlefield,
Mhm.
and it's all going to work itself out. And I think people get on these things for a ride, and then I think they can do damage to people, and people don't see they don't see the other person, and they don't see what they're doing, but
Mhm.
because of the distance and so forth. But I don't know. What are you going
Mhm.
to do? I think it's an
Yeah.
ego trip to think like, oh, we're going to have this power. And I think with this new technology, you get this ego trip that we're solving the world's problems. But
Mhm.
I
Right.
don't know. All right, you get to talk now.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if someone actually goes into something like, I'm going to start a cult.
I don't
Like, what
think
am
they
I going to
did.
do? I'm going to start a cult. Or if it's just, like having common interest and, like, and they gain a little more power and a little more power and a little more control. And all of a sudden it just explodes.
I
And
think they were nuts to begin
I
with. I
don't know.
think Jim Jones was nuts, but
Oh,
he
well, yeah.
wanted, but he want. I think he had like, and he had an alcoholic father, and then he had pet funerals, and I think he had, he wanted to do. There might have been a good side to him that wanted to believe, but then God betrayed him. It was like he was doing this interracial group, and but he wasn't making any money, and I think he went to a guy who said, here's how you make money: you do
Right.
fake healings, and you have people go to, evangelize at a house, but you go into their bathroom, you find out what medication you're on, and then when they come to the ceremony, you say, oh, there's someone in the audience who has
Yeah.
edemia or whatever, and please come forward. And I don't know, and then it just got, and he was a drug addict, and he just became very paranoid. It was the classic, like, yeah, but it's, I mean, I don't think people would have been drawn in if there wasn't good things about it, and there wasn't this sort of, a
Oh,
lot of it is this idealism, or sometimes this utopian idea that can
mhm.
draw people in. I think, I don't know, Nexium was like a pyramid scheme, or what do they call it, multi-level
Yeah.
marketing. But he was already, as a kid, it said his mother would overhear him, I think she was an alcoholic, like telling, when he was like in junior high school, like calling a girl and saying, oh, you're the one, I love you, you're the best, and then calling another girl and saying the exact same thing.
Mhm.
So a lot of times, and I don't, like Ted Bundy, I think he was adopted, but I don't know if anything really horrific happened to him. He just like had some pieces missing. But
Mhm.
so I don't think, I think, but yeah, it's weird.
Mhm.
All right.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so, do you, Do you you said you weren't an artist, or did you do any?
I'm not currently an artist. I spent 2 years in art school out of high school, but I had, you know, I was more interested in the concept of being an artist than actually putting the work into being an artist.
Okay.
Which, and I was also very interested in getting out of my house, um, you know, um, and being on my own as an 18. No, I was 19 then. Yeah, no, I was 18 when I went to school.
Where'd you
So
go?
I went to Columbus College of Art and Design for two
Okay.
years. Um, and which is a very good school at the time, but I had no discipline, and it's like, oh, and then I discovered LSD and had all kinds
Huh?
of fun, and and it's like, okay, well, like 2 years of this, it's like, okay, well, I'm not really going to grow up to be a performance artist, so I'm gonna like go to work and go to school when I'm ready, which is what I did. So, but I mean, I love art. I appreciate it. I collect. I'm fascinated with it. I if someone told me to draw something, I could draw it. But yeah, not currently.
So, what artists do you like?
Yeah. Um. I mean, painters. There's a contemporary painter now. Her name is Audrey Ryan. She's out of New York, Brooklyn. I really like her. Um, I, my Leela Corman. She's a contemporary. She's doing graphic novels. She has been, and she has something coming out that's just absolutely spectacular. That merges female wrestling in the '40s and concentration camps, and
Wow.
the illustrations are spectacular. I can't wait until
Okay.
this comes out. Um, so those are some contemporary artists who I like. Go I Dora Maar, who is if you do you know who she is?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so if you look up Dora Maar, it's going to say she was Picasso's muse. She was the model for the Weeping Woman. But she was an important artist in her own right. It's just that,
Was she in the Déjeuner painting? That
yes, I'm sure she was. Yeah, yeah,
oh, okay.
she was.
All right. I don't.
Yeah, the surrealists, um, any of those. I love op art, Richard Anaskevich. Um, anything that fucks with your vision and perception.
Richard Stankiewicz?
Yeah, Richard
No,
Anaskevich.
Anaskevich. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know any of these people.
Oh, okay.
I was a movie guy.
Okay.
But what are you reading these days?
I'm reading. I'll be honest. I've had a lot of trouble concentrating, um,
Okay.
and I blame that on social media and looking at screens all day. But I'm making myself read. I'm reading a couple things. It's like I have a book in my tote bag. I have a book by the side of my bed. I have like kind of books scattered around the house that I pick up. One thing that I'm reading is The Body Keeps the Score, which is by Vessel Vanderkolk, and he is the foremost researcher on how trauma and PTSD affect the physical body. It is the book to read on PTSD and trauma.
Okay.
Very good. I'm also reading a book by a woman, Kasia Urbaniak, um, and this is called Unbound. And Unbound, the subtitle is A Woman's Guide to Power. And it's excellent reading. Just frames how women respond to power and how to sort of like gain a voice. And I use a lot of her work in my therapeutic work to teach women, especially women, to use their voices. Um, what else do I have around? Like graphic novels. I love. My boyfriend's a graphic novelist and an illustrator. I love his work too. Dave McKenna, which is fantasy, screwball fantasy porn, like cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what
Uh,
social media are you on that's distracting you? Because I'm
uh,
only on Facebook and I
yeah,
barely use my phone. Yeah?
yeah, face bag. It's just scroll, scroll, scroll. It's so awful. I have to, I go through breaks,
Yeah.
you
Do you
know, if I
meditate at all?
I I do my best,
Yeah,
like, late at night.
yeah,
Yeah, I need to get back into better self-care and healthier
right.
practices.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
I
the
need
thing
to.
with meditation is that I'm like, once I clear out all the garbage, I'm met with the void, and if I can make friends with the void, then I'm kind of
Mhm,
okay. And
right.
I'm like older, so I'm like, I have to remind myself that the peace I feel now has been hard won, and that a lot of times I'm like, I need another adventure, I need a new challenge, but I have to realize that I've had a lot of difficulty in my life, and that this peace is something that I've always wanted and I should cherish. And a lot of times it helps me to think of like dead relatives who I'm sure have struggled and had worse
Mhm,
lives than me, and get out of my self pity and say, like, if you're there, come. It's almost an invocation. Say, come within my soul, and let me share this peace with you. You
mhm,
know, my grandfather, and anybody that I can remember, or even people I don't know. And even like I found that sometimes bringing um, people real or imagined, because it's all at that point when I'm meditating imagined anyway.
mhm,
And play with that just like you play with the tarot cards, and have
mhm,
come into this peace I'm feeling. So I feel less, I feel less like alone, and I feel less that this piece is useless. And I feel like even if I'm, because I don't, I have a wife, but I'm working remotely, so I don't have a lot of human contact. So I mean, it helps me maintain it more and feel like it's not just self-serving. and
mhm,
even and I know it's a bit of a fantasy because I don't necessarily believe in an afterlife, but it
mhm,
has to do, I think, a lot of like in some spiritual traditions, a lot of has to do with honoring ancestors and so forth. And I was always an existentialist. I was like, when
mhm,
kids in junior high school were like, "What are you?" I'm half French. I'm half this. I was like, I don't care. I'm nobody. I'm Carrie, who was born at this, and it started then. And so
mhm,
I think that that was fine until at a certain point I had to realize, I don't know, get grateful, and also like just be more generous with that spirit. And I just think I don't know, I feel good about that, because a lot of times if I have a resentful memory against a parent or somebody, that it just blocks my full understanding of them as full human, flawed human beings, rather than these actors in my movie that failed or something like
mhm,
that. So um yeah, so I fill the void with better things than,
mhm,
even if it's imaginal, and I allow myself to do that, because I just think, peace is so rare, and there's so much suffering in the world. I think, you know and but a lot of times it becomes overwhelming that I don't do anything about it. But I do know that, I'll sit next to or across from a very smelly homeless person and be okay, like where
mhm.
everybody else is like way down. It's like I'm okay with the smell, and I'm okay that he may be reading a Bible with all sorts of cross outs and lots
Mhm.
of notes, and I can actually have a conversation with
Yep.
him and be okay, and like just to kind of accept. And I think um that I feel good about that, meaning
Mhm.
that I've gone to the darkness and I'm not triggered by it, and I
Mhm.
can bring peace to that situation. I'm not a hero, but it's just like, I don't
Mhm.
know. I
Yeah.
just feel like people want to turn away from sort of this stuff,
Mhm.
and I'm like, I know, they're in a certain prison, and like isolating them further is not the best thing to do. And
Absolutely.
And I feel like a lot of times they're the deepest souls, the
Oh, of
people. They're
course.
the
Yeah.
most like sensitive, and they're the poets,
Mhm.
and they're the artists. They just haven't been able to function, or they're addicted to something, is
Mhm.
the same thing. So I'm still drawn to that because my mother was sort of like a homeless person who had a home. So I think it's
Mhm.
in, and I've had, mental illness in my family. So I just feel like, but I know that thing. I used to be around and people, oh, that guy, he's on medication. Everybody's like, oh, like
Yeah.
medication is so common now.
Mhm.
But all right. So we got 4 minutes until it's an hour and a half.
Okay.
Do you want me to put anything in the notes, or
Yeah. In how do you mean in the notes?
I don't know, in the description?
Yeah.
Just you can email me whatever, or I'll just, even if you want to put a fake name or
Yeah.
or
Oh,
anything,
yeah. No, you can use my real name. I mean, I
which
the
is the email.
yeah, Jill.
Okay.
Yeah. I use the name Jay Dombrowski on Facebook.
Yeah, I was a little confused. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah, most folks are.
And I'm
Because
paranoid by nature. So I was like, who's this?
oh, got it, got it, got it. Yeah, no. I responded because I knew Robert and I had so much fun on his film, and he put something up saying like, "Oh, hey, here's my friend
Yeah,
who's
I didn't.
stuff," and I love being part of people's things. It's like I love contributing to art.
That's what I'm so impressed by, because I was like, because I do this because I'm paranoid by nature, and then I'm like, and I'm self-obsessed. I'm always talking about my stupid self. But um and then when Robert was like made it an open call, I was like, don't, it's not an open call,
I know,
and it's
yeah,
like,
that's what he
and I
said.
was like, what is he doing? And like,
Yeah,
he sort of panicked, and I was like, I didn't tell him it was an open call. And then I
yeah,
was like,
yeah.
but one of, but I'm not, I don't think that's a good quality. But so I'm really impressed that once I once I realized, oh, this is Robert's friend and she was in the film, and that it's not a guy, it's a, because I
Yeah,
googled that name, and then I nothing came up, and I
yeah,
was like,
yeah, yeah,
so, but the fact that you're still, and I was like, no, I have these other people I
yeah.
wanted to schedule, and then I did about three in a row,
Hmm.
and I was like, all right, if you're still up
That's
to
good. Yeah,
chat, and I know nothing about you, I thought, well, let's
yeah.
just go in and like, it's
Terrific.
that's
Yeah,
part of the fun of this, is that there's no goal besides, as long as you're happy with the recording, I can, and posting it, then
yeah.
that's just fine. And like, if four people watch it, or if we watch it in 10 years and go like, who the hell were those people?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
No,
be it. And
I love
I was
the
impressed
project.
by the openness, and
Yeah.
the sort of, because it's not something I like about myself, the paranoia, but it's there for some kind of reason, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I use the name Jay Dombrowski on social media to avoid like people coming, like associating Jill Twohig the therapist or Jill Twohig the girl I knew in grade school, and like I do it to like protect myself. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want people from my past who I didn't like finding me, or my
Right.
clients finding me. So I have this. So the name Jay Dombrowski came from my grandmother's maternal, or my both my maternal and my paternal grandmother's maiden names, you know, Maud J.
It's,
Phyllis Dombrowski. And
yeah,
so,
I was interested with the whole idea that I missed the whole generation of like role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, where people would take on avatars. Like, that was like after
mhm,
me. I never did that, and I was just watching a podcast where someone was talking about that, and I thought maybe that's has a lot to do with what's going on today. But it's whatever. I'm
mhm.
not going to open another can of worms.
Yeah.
About an hour and a half, I think.
Okay,
You
great.
have anything else to add? Or
No,
good with me posting it?
go on and post it. This was so cool. I mean, like
Okay,
I
good.
love doing stuff like this. Like
Yeah,
someone has a project, I'm like, yeah, if I have time, I'm in. So
that's
yeah.
beautiful. You're rare.
Oh,
So, or maybe,
yeah.
I've got the anti-Kavorka. I don't know. You know what that's from?
Mm-mm.
Seinfeld, I guess. All
Okay.
right.
All right.
Have a great night. Thanks
You
for doing
too.
this.
Nice to
And take
talk to
care.
you.
Hope to see you in the real world.
Likewise. Yeah.
All right.
Have a
Take
good
care.
night, Carrie. Bye.
Bye.